Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Israel's Prime Minister confirms the death of Hamas Gaza Chief Mohammed Sinwar in an Israeli airstrike. Zelensky meets Friedrich Merz in Berlin as Germany promises to finance Ukraine's long-range missiles. Meanwhile, Russia offers Ukraine a date and place for negotiations. And in an Al Arabiya English exclusive, former Liverpool legend Michael Owen reflects on the parade crash as a 53-year-old suspect remains in custody. Now to our top story. An Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has confirmed Hamas's Gaza chief Mohammed Sinwar has been eliminated. Speaking to Parliament earlier, Netanyahu included Mohammed Sinwar, one of Israel's most wanted, and the younger brother of former leader Yahya Sinwar, in a list of Hamas leaders killed in Israeli strikes. Take a listen.
In 600 days of war of revival, we have changed the face of the Middle East. We repelled the terrorists from our territory, entered the Gaza Strip with force, eliminated tens of thousands of terrorists, and took out Daif, Haniyeh, Yahya Sinwar, and Mohammed Sinwar.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Dr. Elie Hindy, Professor of International Relations at the American University in the Emirates, and Risk and Emergency Manager Dr. Carlotta Rodriguez. Both join me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Elie, I just want to start with you. And we obviously heard from Benjamin Netanyahu there saying Mohammed Sinwar has now been eliminated. Is this a turning point in the war or a symbolic win with limited strategic effect?
Definitely not a change of things. It might have some symbolism with the fact that the brother took after his elder brother Yahya Sinwar, and this is a hit for the operational aspect of Hamas in Gaza, but definitely not a strategic win. Definitely we are not closer to the end of the war. When we understand Hamas, we understand the ideology behind it. Like any armed group or any even terrorist organization, if you want to call it like that, this is a continuation where people are willing to die for the cause. And when they die, there's simply other people who take on, and they are happy to die and to offer their life for the ideology that they believe in. So we're nowhere closer to the end of the war. It's simply another step. It might be symbolic for Netanyahu. It might give him a bit of momentum after all the opposition he's having and after all the opposition from the people, from the parents of the hostages, but definitely just another step while the problem in Gaza remains the same.
And I was just also thinking, while Netanyahu was speaking, he actually said, in the last 2 days, we have been in a dramatic turn towards a complete defeat of Hamas. So both you, Carlotta, and Dr. Elie just think that's something that is impossible.
I believe, and that I agree with Dr. Elie, that this is something that cannot be eradicated completely, or at least is not as easy as they make it sound, let's say. So there might be improvement in that sense, but I don't believe there is going to be a complete defeat of Hamas.
We have to keep in mind that with all the violence that's happening in Gaza, this is creating a new generation of people who are as aggressive, as extremist, as haters of Israel as the previous generations. So we're not actually moving Israel towards further safety or towards, a solution for the problem, unfortunately, with the way we're dealing with it.
And Carlotta, you really deal with the humanitarian side of things. Yes. And what does this say about the current state of humanitarian aid delivery into Gaza? Are we seeing a complete breakdown of safe humanitarian corridors when we look at the situation that we're faced with?
For example, if you look at the latest events, especially with the gunfire event at the humanitarian hub in Gaza, we can see that there are many issues in the delivery of humanitarian aid. I believe that given the current situation, it is very unlikely that we can follow all the principles that we should follow in terms of humanitarian aid: humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. So if we cannot at least make sure and ensure that there are organizations in the field that, first of all, know the territory, second, know the people, and know the situation and also the state of mind of the people, because obviously they haven't received, for example, humanitarian aid in the last 3 months, and it's not the first time it happens. So we need to understand this, and so we need to have organizations in place that can actually know the situation and deliver aid properly. Right now, the situation in terms of delivery does not meet the requirements in terms of humanitarian aid, and so we saw how it turned out. So
but this was expected, no? Because of the complete collapse of the logistic operations.
Exactly. So sometimes people think that humanitarian aid is just shelter, food, non-food items, hygiene kits, but the logistics part of it is actually the main component. So if we don't have people who can actually deliver it properly, so again, it has to be neutral, impartial, based on needs, respecting people and the dignity of the people. Obviously, it's going to backfire, let's say.
They did try to come up with a solution with that American organization that was established, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I think it might have been also a way for Netanyahu to pull the Americans into the whole mess and make them maybe responsible for some part of the humanitarian if they're asking for it, so come do it yourself. But even that did not work out because, again, the whole setup is not there. And Carlotta, you were telling us about also the fact that if the flow of humanitarian aid is not steady and regular, then the people, what do you expect? Hungry people, starving, who see 2, 10, 100 trucks come in, while not knowing when the next truck is going to come.
So what is the answer to this? Because I'm hearing both of you speaking. These people are absolutely desperate in Gaza. Witnesses say food trucks have been stopped. They've been looted. The aid distribution centres completely overrun by crowds. We've actually seen desperate people, chaos. I mean, if this isn't going to work, what is going to work? What's the answer to this?
In my personal opinion, I don't believe that bringing in external organizations will actually work. We have organizations that have been working for a long time in the field. So just saying, I don't know for what reason you cannot work here, and we're just bringing new people in who don't know the territory, who don't know the people, who are not trusted, by the way, by the people, because this is also a matter of trust. If people don't trust who is supposed to support them and help them, this is also what is going to happen, because they will not believe that there will be a fair and continuous distribution of humanitarian support. So we need to have the organizations that were already in place, give them the trust, give them the chance to actually organize and establish the logistics of humanitarian aid, possibly having a steady flow of humanitarian support and not having 40 trucks and then another 3 months of nothing, because this will be the reaction of people.
Then this leads us to the issue that Netanyahu government is accusing even UN agencies like UNHCR, like UNRWA, like the World Food Program, etc., of being biased or of having members of Hamas within their teams or within their things. These are very wild accusations that are difficult to measure and trust. But anyway, the result of that cannot be all UN agencies are out and we're going to invent a new system and put it in place and hope that works. It doesn't work. The established systems, the international law, the proper mechanisms, these are what have been trialed and that proven to be working. Now we're hearing a new suggestion, which is the sterile zones that Netanyahu is suggesting. If you look at it theoretically and by principle, it is definitely wrong in all perspectives. You keep moving people here and there and trying to keep them alive just by giving them the very basics. But with the catastrophic situation that we are in, I don't know, it might be at least a breath of air where You move the people to what you have determined as a safe Hamas-free zone, give them a proper shelter, and then give them proper food and medicine. Who's give them? Again, it's whose responsibility? That's another challenge. In my opinion, the occupying de facto authority is the responsible for providing
who is
the basic
Israel?
needs. Who is Israel in that sense? Definitely Hamas is to be blamed for the whole maybe setup as having fighters among civilians and all of that. But now the reality is Gaza is under occupation. Israel is the de facto authority. It has the responsibility. So maybe the sterile zones could be at least a way out of the catastrophe that we are seeing as the potential starvation of 2 million people.
And maybe a way to treat people too, because medical situations need to be addressed. Hospitals, as we know, have been extensively bombed by Israel. And that's something I wanted to move on to. I just wanted to go back to Mohammed Sinwar, because he was actually the brother of Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind behind the October the 7th attacks. And we saw Benjamin Netanyahu stand up in the Knesset today and say he's been eliminated, and it was on an airstrike in a hospital in the south of Gaza. Is this a way for Netanyahu now to say to the West, actually, we are doing the right thing, we are moving to eradicating Hamas, we know where they are? Because we've seen a lot of outcry from the West. We've seen the UK, we've seen France, we've seen Canada, we've seen Italy. What, really speak out against Israel. And I think there is a West shift happening.
Yeah, I believe there is, because even though I believe it's too little and too late, definitely too late. But yes, because at some point you cannot just justify the killing of, so much collateral damage just to kill one or two Hamas leaders or fighters. Because this
breaking
goes,
all the international humanitarian law and all the conventions.
All the conventions, Geneva Conventions, humanitarian law, but also principles of humanity itself. I mean, this goes against everything, especially when you're bombing hospitals, schools, ambulances. This cannot be. So in a way, we understand it is a sort of justification saying, yes, we are doing this, we know it's wrong, but we are doing this for a reason, and we are reaching our goals. So yes, somehow this makes sense. But I believe that, there is a shift in the West saying, enough is enough. Because as you were saying, it is part of the ideology. It's not just a group of fighters. It's the ideology of the whole. I don't want to say the whole population, but it's spread out. So there is a new generation of fighters who are fed up with the occupation and the way they're treated. So they will be radicalized somehow.
Just to be fair on all measures, hiding among civilian places is also a violation of international humanitarian law. Using civilian shields, but also the setup, the hospitals, the government institutions, etc. These are also violations which Hamas has done significantly, letting alone how they were using the funds that was coming into Gaza to operate their military operations rather than, the safety and the well-being of the people. So definitely, once again, we say the people of Gaza, the civilian of Gaza, are stuck between two atrocities, two institutions that don't care about their life and their well-being and don't care about international law and about the humanitarian principles.
That was fascinating. Thank you, both of you, for your insights into that. Much appreciated. And we're going to move on to our next story now. And President Zelensky has been in Berlin today as Germany promised to finance Ukrainian-made long-range missiles. In a joint press conference, the German Chancellor said the weapons meant Ukraine could defend itself beyond its borders. And Germany wanted permanent peace for Ukraine. Here's what he had to say.
Our defence ministers are going to sign a memorandum of understanding on the procurement of long-range weapon systems produced by Ukraine, so-called long-range fires. There will be no range limits on these. Ukraine will be able to fully defend itself, including against military targets outside its own territory.
Carlotta, we've just heard there from the German Chancellor. We know Zelensky was in Berlin. Is this an escalation of drone warfare, and is it sustainable for Ukraine?
Well, let's say that somehow it levels the playing field, because we can say that using drones minimizes loss and costs as well, and it somehow makes it more, let's say, more comparable in terms of forces, number of forces with Russian military forces, let's say. But in terms of sustainability, there are a few points that we might have to discuss. First of all, they need to manufacture these drones, both sides actually. And we have 500 new drone startups in Ukraine, 20 new schools, because also you need to actually, maneuver the drones and fly the drones. So we need the human capital, which now is lacking, so they need to reinforce that. And we also need to manufacture the drones, a new generation of drones. Some of them are AI-driven, not completely, but 10,000 of them, the new generation is almost all AI-driven. And the main problem in terms of sustainability is supply chain, because you can manufacture them in the country, but then where do the pieces, the components, the parts come from? And most of them come from China, for both sides, by the way. So in that sense, we need to understand how long this supply chain can be, in place, and if the human capital will be there, because again, it needs training, it needs time. There is a lot of investment with a program called Army of Drones right now, where they are actually, developing the manufacturing of the drones and also training the people. They're specialists. But again, we also have the other side, which is the counter-drone adaptation. So the more you manufacture them, the more, let's say, the response. The defense will change and will adapt. So this might not be sustainable in the long run, but right now it's probably the best option they have.
But going back to the European support and then the visit to Merz and to Germany and so on, I think the Europeans are more and more invested in that war, and with the American withdrawal, they're putting in more. So in terms of drones, I've read that they're getting not only their manufacturing up and all of that, but also to compensate for the supply chain problem that Dr. Carlotta mentioned, is the fact that they're getting drones from Germany, from Netherlands, but also from Baltic states, Lithuania and Latvia and so on. So all of them are pitching in. But again, how sustainable is that, and to what purpose? And when is this war going to start ending in a way?
And I thought it was quite interesting. You talk about the involvement. We know Germany is really invested in Ukraine, and I think the new chancellor has made that absolutely clear. Front and center. Yeah, absolutely. And there's long-range missiles now. They're giving Ukraine the ability to use that to strike deeper into Russia. And there's been a lot of talk about these Taurus missiles that Germany could also give to Ukraine. It seems to all be a little bit not 100% clear right now what that does mean. But do you think that Germany's now stepping up, because we're seeing the US they've obviously shipped Ukraine loads of weapons, but that's starting to diminish the stockpiles of weapons from America. So is Ukraine now in the situation where Europe really needs to come in? Definitely.
They need to compensate for the lack of flow of weapons, as you mentioned, and artillery and all that kind of technology. But then we need to keep the negotiations in our mind and say that this is, we call it a dead zone or a dead time, where every party is trying to achieve as much as possible to increase or improve his situation on the negotiation table. In that sense, Putin is continuing his attacks, continuing pushing for more and more acquisitions or whatever gains he can do. At the same time, the Europeans are trying not to let Ukraine arrive to the negotiation table too weak. And that's why they're allowing it to maybe use what weapons were not allowed before, and even the range of the missiles now, to be able to at least balance the possibility, the damage.
With the idea that once they get to the negotiating tables, whatever is lost is lost. This is what is actually happening now. So they want to make sure that somehow there is no further loss of territory.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Putin's made that really clear, hasn't he? And I wanted to actually speak about that because we got the news today that Russia has offered Ukraine a date. We know it's the 2nd of June for direct talks again about a pathway to peace, the second time. And do you think Ukraine is going to agree to these talks? And, I mean, has Russia even changed its stance at all?
I don't think Russia has changed its stance, and I don't think Putin is now ready for a peace in that sense. And most importantly, he doesn't want to negotiate the peace with Zelensky. He wants to negotiate the peace with Trump as one piece of the whole negotiations of the Russia with the US, going from their status in the world to their influence, to economic relations, to all these aspects. And then Ukraine is only one piece of the puzzle in that sense. I think the negotiations or the offer that Russia has sent is simply to appease a little bit the anger of Trump, as we have seen a strong reaction from Trump that Putin is not reacting properly, Putin is not giving us anything. But then again, we have to understand how Putin sees these things and how much he thinks he can push the limits little by little, and also, again, make these small gains as he goes before we reach a settlement or a negotiation.
Dr. Carlotta, do you think that Putin is the chief deal maker right now? Do you think he holds all the cards when it comes to what's happening?
Right now, yes. And that's why, as Dr. Elie was mentioning, he's the one negotiating directly with Trump. This is just part of a bigger plan, in my view. The Ukraine is just one of the bargaining chips that he's using for a bigger negotiation with his counterpart, which is the US. He's not really interested in negotiating even with Zelensky himself, because he's only focused on his bigger expansion plan, I would say. So yes, definitely the answer is yes.
And I think that's a problem. I think we see a growing frustration from Donald Trump in the US. I think his rhetoric towards Russia has slightly changed. And he was actually asked today why he hasn't put sanctions on Russia, Donald Trump, because, that's something Zelensky's really pushing for. And he says he doesn't want to screw up the chances of a peace deal, adding he'll sit down with Vladimir Zelensky and Putin. So do you think, both of you, we can see them all in a room together soon?
Soon, I doubt. No. Maybe Trump and Putin with more regular phone calls and interactions, maybe, because, again, of that perspective that Putin sees. But again, we have to remember that Trump promised peace in the first week, which proved to be not very realistic and not very possible. So this is where the frustration starts. Him, the deal maker, him, the one who delivers on his election promises and so on. Now he's in the real world. He's where we have a strong power like Putin, a very seasoned politician, and even a warmonger, if we want to call it, or war hero in that sense, trying to use all tools possible, including more war and more aggression. This is going to require a different approach from Trump. And again, as I said, maybe Russia is making sure he doesn't go too much towards cutting out and starting the negative process of sanctions or things like that.
No, a very good point. Thank you so much for that. But also, I was just thinking, sanctions on Russia, they haven't really seemed to make a difference, have they? So, to a huge degree. So, it's always sanctions are always, I think, a really interesting concept when it comes to negotiating things. But we're going to move on to our next story now. So, thank you so much. And in an exclusive interview with Al Arabiya English, former Liverpool legend and footballer Michael Owen has reflected on the parade car crash that left nearly 50 fans injured. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard the news, it was obviously your mind starts racing. You can't help but think, what was the motive? What's happened? Is everyone safe? Has there been any fatalities? You can't help but think back to other, awful situations in Liverpool's past with different disasters. Obviously, the Heysel Stadium and then Hillsborough. and you can't help, your mind can't help wondering why, and we still sort of await the news really in terms of what exactly happened. And it's such a shame because, you know, you want these huge events to go off with great celebration, with great happiness, with great joy. And of course, this headline has dominated it all. So very sad indeed.
And Michael, you know those streets. You've walked them after wins, after really tough games when you're playing for Liverpool. Does it feel personal when something like this actually happens in the place that you've called home for so long?
I suppose it would if there was something sinister about the, let's call it an attack. As I say, we're still almost guessing as to what it was. The authorities have ruled out any, any real sort of threat, any real problem. So whether the gentleman involved was, intoxicated, whether he took the wrong turn, whether he panicked, whether he did this on purpose, we're still waiting to find out. But I think they've ruled out some of the more, some other scenarios, let's say. So that, I don't know. Let's wait and see what comes out of it. But it does just make you rather upset about a great occasion like this that was almost, that has been spoilt really. This has taken all the headlines. Nobody's really sharing pictures of the parade itself. I had family members that were at the parade, and of course, the first thing you do when you hear about it is you phone them. You hear, you want to know that everybody's okay, everybody's safe, and that's the sad thing. It's only sort of a few miles down the road, so yeah, very worrying. But it could have been worse, and hopefully, we find out more, and hopefully there was no real motives, let's say, for what happened on that evening.
Yes, indeed. And Michael, we are hearing from police that the 53-year-old man who was arrested remains in custody, and he was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder, dangerous driving and driving while unfit through drugs. But obviously, of course, we'll find out more details about that, as you do say. But what has been the reaction from your former teammates? Have you been speaking to any of them? What's been the feeling between the members of Liverpool Football Club?
Well, just one of sadness, really, because it should have been a day of celebration. It has been an amazing few weeks. Liverpool have known that they've won the league for some time now, and it's been just the most incredible party from when it was official against Tottenham Hotspur at home to the lifting of the trophy at Anfield on Sunday. It's been a great moment. Remember, Liverpool, last time they won the Premier League, it was during COVID, so they couldn't celebrate with their fans. So the trophy, the Premier League trophy, has never been lifted in front of the fans before, and this was sort of the first time in many, many years that celebration could take place. The league winners, I think it was 30 odd years ago or something, that Liverpool have managed to lift the league trophy in front of their fans. So it was a joyous occasion. And I think as soon as it happened, like normal, like our communication nowadays entails, that, messages go round. Have you seen the news? Have you heard the news? Keep me informed. We're all on sort of WhatsApp groups and chats and things like that. So, one of shock to start with, and then of course you get your head around it and you try to understand, and then you want to know more details, whether any motives, that anybody, any fatalities or anybody badly injured. And you think about your own family being there, etc., etc. So I think just a state of panic really for the first hour or so, until it all calms down a little bit.
There we are, Dr. Elie and Carlotta. That was my conversation there with Michael Owen. And I just wanted to put a question to you both about the incident that happened in Liverpool. Should police be prioritising speed over certainty in high-profile cases? Because this is something that we saw happen after this ramming incident that occurred.
Well, Carlotta is the expert on communication, so I leave that to her. But very quickly, I think when a statement by the police can calm down any potential social tensions, then definitely, why not? As long as the facts are clear, as long as we are keeping the transparency. So stating that the person is white British male, that's by itself could simply decrease the tension. And this brings us to how do we define terrorism, what is a threat and what is not. But that's a different story.
You're going too far. In terms of speed and certainty, yes, there are some principles that we called principles of effective communication, and two of them are be first and be right. These are actually the first. And the point is that nowadays, especially with a lot of information that we have from social media, everybody posting everything, we don't have sometimes the time to be right, or at least to be certain, 100%, but we still have to balance it. We need to be first because we want to be the trustworthy source of information, so we don't want someone else to fill the void so that they become, the official source of information. The police needs to be that, first source. So,
and I also guess right now, Carlotta, we live in a world where when an incident like this happens, it's all on mobile phones, and that footage is pushed out straight away. So how do police manage that system, or how do they communicate to people?
True and fake videos pushed out.
Yeah, exactly. True and fake. Yeah, absolutely.
That's why they want to be the ones who are communicating to the population, because at least what they post or they publish is the official source of information, the official information. We're sure that if the police post something, it's not going to be a fake video. And possibly with context, because the other issue that we have is not just that they are fake, but they are taken out of context. So sometimes we don't even understand what we're seeing. And it happened even with the news. There were pieces of footages that were describing something that wasn't actually what was happening. So I believe that the police has a really hard job in this sense, because again, they need to be the first, and they need to provide information, because before we used to let the police do their job, and we were waiting for the information, but now we have so much information that we want it now. So their job is not only to investigate and to understand what actually happened, but also to communicate to the people, so to not spread panic, to make sure that they have the right information, to make sure that there are no conspiracy theories, that start from these events.
And I think we've seen that in the past, especially in the UK. But Dr. Elie, I really thought what was interesting is they came out and said he's a white, 53-year-old male, he's British, and he was acting alone. And that seemed to be all the information they released at first. We didn't know motive. We probably still don't actually really have a motive to what happened. So are police unintentionally reinforcing this identity-based bias by highlighting race and nationality so early like they did in this case?
They are in a certain way, but again, this is it's the discretion of the police on how to calm the situation down and how to prevent conspiracy theories from growing, and also how to again manage the public order in the broader sense of things. I do believe that transparency with the public is always the best policy, with respect to, of course, the protection of the process of investigation and so on. But also, let's keep in mind that we have a tendency in the West in general, unfortunately, if it is a white male, then not to call it terrorism altogether. And we go back to what is our definition of terrorism and how do we perceive it as, is it a threat to me personally as a viewer, as a listener who hears the story or not? In general, to call it terrorism, you need to have the aspect of pushing a certain agenda or pushing a certain ideology, be it religious or fanatic or political or whatever. So saying he's acting alone, it means he doesn't have the alternative motive. Saying he's British, it means he's not, a migrant that might cause a reaction to migrant, as we've seen frequently, etc., etc.
Yeah, I believe that the key word here is context, in the sense that in general, personally, I would say, no, of course you shouldn't, disclose the race or even the gender. I mean, we don't need that information. However, given the present context, especially in Europe, I would say, this can create different reactions. So unfortunately, I would say, unfortunately. If it had been a brown person, the reaction would have been different. So I believe that in that case, the police wanted to prevent people from, spreading fake news or spreading, terror or fear that something else might happen similar. So I don't agree with this approach, I would say, or with the words that are being used. But in that specific context, right now, maybe that was actually the best solution to avoid reactions, let's say.
And I think that's something that's been brought up time and time again in this case, because there was a Southport knife attack that happened in a similar place. Merseyside police, who oversaw this incident, oversaw that incident. And actually, the lack of information created this huge vacuum on social media. And then we saw these riots that broke out, and it was actually really distressing for many people involved. And I think Merseyside police, maybe, even though you said it goes against what they should be doing, has probably learnt from a past mistake now.
Yeah.
Not to say that, for example, gender is significant in a way or the age is significant, but simply in sharing as much information as possible to avoid the void that will birth conspiracy theories of all kinds. And we've seen the people really, like, for example, one of the main things that Trump did was to declassify the information on the JFK files, on the Martin Luther King fight, because he thinks this is so attached to the, general consciousness of the people. They want to know. And if they don't know, it will create all kind of threats and theories and conspiracies.
Because there are things that do not need to be shared, or at least do not need to be shared.
Like what?
Do not need to be shared, for example, before the investigation is complete, for example.
Definitely.
So there are, this hunger for information might actually backfire, because people want it, they want it now, and sometimes they don't understand that even the source of information doesn't have all the information. So you cannot expect me to give information that is partial, wrong, fake, or again, wrong, simply. So we have to be careful with the information we share.
Definitely.
But the approach is right now is I want it all, and I want it now. And it doesn't really work like that, especially when it comes to national security issues. That there must be, some time to actually process the information and understand also how to deliver the information. Because unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, the way we deliver information can cause different reactions.
Definitely.
So just giving the information as it is bluntly, sometimes it's not really the best way. Even the way you couple different words in the same sentence can make a huge difference in the reaction of the people. So I'm not sure that.
That's why I think we go back to the discretion of the police or of the people responsible. But also I bet a lot on the right to know, the concept of the right to know as the right also to create proper accountability and so on. So transparency within the limitations of what serves the case and what serves the national stability, if I may call it in that sense.
Just giving enough space for discretion to not be perceived as lack of transparency. That's
exactly
we need right now to balance, let's say, both issues and both needs.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it's the last time that this is going to happen in the current environment that we're in. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that. And now we're going to move to that point in the show where Dr. Elie and Carlotta, you've come up with a couple of quirky stories of the day. And Dr. Elie, I don't know what to think about yours. Yours is about bear meat going on sale. I mean, eating a predator? I don't know about this situation.
Yeah, well, we're talking first of all about Slovakia, that has an overpopulation of bears and where the attacks are becoming more frequent on people, especially living in that area or maybe jogging in the forest or something like that. So the government has decided to start a culling process to make sure that the number of the population of the bears goes back to normal trends. Now, my question is, why can't you move them to somewhere else? Does this create an environmental issue, a different environment for the bears, and so on?
This is actually something that happens a lot around the world, and in Africa and places like Botswana, where they have a no poaching policy, you can just take photographs of the wildlife. And a little bit like in Slovakia, there becomes an overpopulation of animals and it begins to affect the ecosystem.
True.
So culling is something that that is part of the environmental cause and part of what they need to do to save people, to save vegetation. But really, where would you move these bears? I don't know. Would you want... Carlotta, you're from Italy?
I wouldn't move them.
You're from Italy. Would you want the Slovakia's bears in Italy?
I don't think they would survive. We can have them. I mean.
But you know,
since
interesting
we're killing
concept.
them anyway,
Yeah.
the idea was to eat them.
Yes.
rather
At least
than-
that's sustainable.
Rather
I
than
agree.
rather than sending them to waste in that sense, since the bear is edible and
Yeah.
since the people don't mind that. So they're going to make sure the health issues, the safety issues, all of that is taken into consideration. And then the meat that is possible to be eaten, it will be sold, it will be on the market. And this is causing debate on so many levels, starting from EU policies compared to national policies, environment against, people's safety,
Yeah.
all different aspects of discussions and
I will go to
debates.
Slovakia to try this.
You would
bears
go
too.
and eat it. Would you eat
I
bear?
will try.
She will go specifically to
Specifically for the bears too.
just to
Dr.
try it.
Ellie, would you give it a go? Would you
I
eat
would
bear
give
meat?
it a go, yes.
I feel like I'm the only one who wouldn't.
I mean, going back again to the concept, as you mentioned, that is popular everywhere in the world sometimes, and depending on the situation. In Australia, people get surprised when we say killing kangaroos is not only allowed, it's encouraged.
Yes.
Because without that killing, the population will overgrow and will cause serious problems. So people regularly hunt and eat kangaroos and other animals. So yes, I would try it. And I don't think it's cruel. It's somehow keeping a certain balance, if we may say.
And now we're going to move on to something a little bit different, but also about
Animals,
but birds this time. And Carlotta, yours is about these pigeons getting trapped on a plane. It's crazy, the footage.
Poor Delta flight traveling from Minneapolis was delayed after 2 pigeons ended up on board the aircraft.
There we are, we can see it on there.
And one of the passengers managed to catch one with his jacket. And then when they were finally ready to take off again, a second one showed up. The conversation was really funny because the pilot asked the tower, "Are you ready for this? There is a pigeon on the airplane." There is a pigeon on the airplane and it won't go away. And the pilot said, no, I don't think so until we open the door. Oh, that's a first for me. That was really, really funny. But it made me think about all the risks that I have to include in my risk management plans. And pigeons was never one of them.
Definitely not pigeons inside the plane.
No.
We've had
Because I
incidences.
have, a list of other incidents and, flocks of geese, gulls, ostrich, swans even, but they were all outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but
And there's
I
that
have
thing-
one bat.
Do you remember
in-
there's that famous movie called Scully about
Yes,
the...
Sully, yeah.
Sully, that's it. Yeah, the famous movie. I got that
didn't
wrong.
even know we have a Russian version of that.
Oh, really?
Because that was Miracle on the Hudson. And now we have, in 2019, there was Miracle in the Cornfield, which is the same accident, but it was because of a flock of gulls.
In
wow.
Russia.
In Russia.
Interesting.
But I mean, I always thought it was annoying to sit near kids on a plane, but there's pigeons
There's
now.
worse.
I've got that.
There's
It's even
something
worse. Who knew?
And before you ask, I would eat pigeons, of course.
Oh, would you? You know what, Dr. Elie? I feel like if you go to London or you go to England and you go to a very fancy place, there's always often pigeon on the menu, actually.
Yeah.
It's
Or
still
to
quite
Egypt.
common. Or to Egypt. Oh, really?
Yes.
And to England. So maybe one day you can have your pigeon dinner. But thank you so much for your
Thank
thoughts
you.
on that. And those stories, they were absolutely great. And that's all we've got time for today. Thanks to today's guest, Dr. Elie Hindy, Professor of International Relations at the American University in the Emirates, and Risk and Emergency Manager, Dr. Carlotta Rodriguez. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on X. GNT with Tom Burgess-Watson is coming up next. Goodbye and thank you.